All right, being 6 p.m. on Monday, August 19th, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Winooski City Council. We will begin with the please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilor Mike Myers.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up, we have agenda review. This is a chance to make any adjustments to the agenda. I don't think we have any concerns. Next is our public comment. This is space to make a comment about anything that is not included on today's agenda. If there's an item on the agenda, please wait until that item comes up. Any public comment? All right. Next, we have our consent agenda. Up for approval, we have our city council minutes from July 15th, payroll warrant ending June 30 to July 13th, July 14 to July 29, July 28 to August 10, and warrant ending August 5th, 8/13, and subsequent payout to June. A Hickok Street loan documents, water and wastewater, and town health officer term to expire August 31st. Are there any questions about the consent agenda? Any questions from the public? I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. City update.
Great, thank you. It's nice to see you all. It's been a while. And just want to give you a friendly reminder that we will see each other twice this week. We're meeting tonight and then again on Wednesday night with the joint meeting with the school trustees up at the school district at 6 o'clock. Couple other updates for today. Today we issued, Paul Sarn, who I believe is here, issued a press release announcing our official partnership with Park Mobile. That is the parking app that is used by our neighboring communities, so UVM, the airport, and Burlington. People are very familiar with using that who use parking apps. So we are implementing it here in Winooski as well as part of our customer service improvement process. And excellent job to Heather and Angela and John Audie and Paul for kicking that off, as well as Public Works for installing all the signage you'll see going up around the city. We are also actively recruiting for part-time and per diem firefighters. Those are folks, usually community residents who live in the community or live close to the community and can be on call to respond to fires, typically off hours. Chief Audie and Paul Sarn used a really innovative technique and actually partnered with Channel 17 to develop a recruitment video that shows what the experience of being a part-time firefighter in Winooski is like. So I encourage people who are interested to go onto the website, winooskivt.gov, check out that video. It's also just a really great video, and thank you to Channel 17 for the partnership. And if you're interested in serving as a volunteer firefighter, please be in touch with myself or Chief Audie. Tonight on your agenda, we're going to be talking about commission liaison appointments. After we discuss that tonight, you'll be contacted by the staff liaison for each of the commissions. We've gotten a great response from folks interested in serving on our revamped commissions. So we'll be setting up interviews in the next couple of weeks with candidates and the council liaison and the staff liaison in the hopes of bringing back recommendations to the council for appointment. We are continuing to work with Champlain Housing Trust on a affordable housing home ownership development down at the front of the O'Brien Community Center site. As you may remember, we signed a pre-development agreement with them about that last year. So Heather and I have been meeting with CHT and their architects and their design team to think about what that product could look like, and are excited to bring you proposals on that over time. We are also working with our architect to ensure that we are retaining enough space at the front of the OCC if we decide to move City Hall down there in the future. But we are figuring out what the square footage for that would need to be. As you may have heard, Sister Pat and her wonderful Peace Initiative group and Councilor Colson may also be announcing this, are putting together an International Day of Peace event on Saturday, September 21st from 5:30 to 7 at the Winooski Senior Center. All are welcome to attend, and we thank St. Stephen's Church for providing the dinner, but certainly the mayor and council are very much encouraged to attend, and Sister Pat would love to see you that evening. As we approach fall and think about kind of re-engaging, we do have a number of volunteer opportunities available, certainly serving on one of our boards and commissions. We're also looking for volunteers to support Meals on Wheels, Senior Center, morning support and nutrition support if you're looking for a way to volunteer at the Senior Center. And then our circles of accountability, our support and accountability, our COSA circles are looking for volunteers here at City Hall. And if you're interested in any of those opportunities, feel free to stop into City Hall or go to our website, winooskivt.gov. And then just a few fun announcements from Community Services Department, reminder about fun upcoming events. The next Winooski Wednesday event will be on September 4th with the Wild Leak River Group. We've had a lot of success this summer with some DIY and drop-in events down at the O'Brien Community Center, so we're going to continue those into the fall. Those are a Tuesday do-it-yourself crafts event from 3 to 5 every Tuesday at the O'Brien Community Center. And then we're doing a drop-in youth dance program Thursday afternoons at the OCC at 4 o'clock for young people, and that will run through this month actually and next month. We have an adult 3-on-3 basketball tournament happening on September 11th and September 12th. If adult 3-on-3 members are interested in joining, registration deadline for that is September 4th. And then, of course, our football and soccer registration is open, and you can register either through City Hall or on our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have council reports. Can I start down here, Jim?
Sure. So this month have been primarily focusing on work to expand on the recommendations of the equity dialogue around expanding one of the goals. We'll be talking about this on Wednesday as well. So I'll save a little bit of progress report on that, but that's been bulk of my time.
Thank you.
Basically ditto. I've been working on the Equity Leadership Council as a result of the Equity Summit, and we'll be reporting out this Wednesday at the council meeting.
Well, definitely looking forward to both of those. I first want to mention that on, was it Monday? Wednesday? Wednesday. Myself, Paul Sarn, and Heather Carrington traveled to Springfield, Vermont to accept a $450,000 grant from the Northern Borders Regional Commission. This money is going to be used to support infrastructure for undergrounding utilities in the Main Street project. So this gets us closer to being able to achieve that vision while also mitigating the impact on taxpayers. So we're very excited about this grant, and thank you to our congressional delegation who definitely gave us a hand on winning that. I attended the Housing Commission. There's going to be an update on that today on the agenda, so I won't go into detail. I also attended the Vermont Community Leadership Summit and represented our city discussing the revitalization of our downtown and now the work that we are doing on the Main Street project. And also, Sue McCormick and Kesha Ram were there presenting on the work that they have done with us with the Equity Summit and the ongoing dialogue. So Winooski had a good presence there. I have also had several meetings with our state senators of Chittenden County, as well as our congressional delegation and their staff, just to talk about priorities in our city as they're thinking about the next legislative session. So, we have the school project, funding for that. We've got this Main Street work, infrastructure needs, the noise mitigation for F-35. So just trying to get the word out about what our needs are, what we're kind of focused on right now. And finally, I reached out to the mosque over on Mallets Bay Avenue and set up a meeting there with some of the elders and had a nice visit, kind of sharing a little bit about how the city council works, how you can be engaged in the city of Winooski, and then heard from them some of their concerns. And we've been talking about this via email as a group about how we can do more of this kind of direct outreach to different groups that we have in the community. So if anyone is listening to this and you're like, come talk to my whatever organization, please let me know. That's it. I will pass to you.
Thank you. So downtown Winooski had French Heritage Day a couple weeks ago at the farmers market, and they reported that it was a huge success. They had about 2,000 people come through the market, which is more than double the normal attendance, so they were feeling really good about that. Thank you to Mayor Lott for being a judge and passing out meat pie. I heard that was a
Yes.
very happy, feel-good event. They are also starting to gear up for Halloween, which seems unbelievable that we're at that point already, but it's true. And they are looking for volunteers, so if folks are interested, you can email info@downtownwinooski.org to get involved. And just to mark your calendars, Halloween will be the weekend of October 26th.
I have a couple things to report. I stopped by the pool about a month ago to see how the construction was going, and I was so surprised to see what I saw. They raised the roof about 1.5 feet. The pool was taken out, and I stopped there this afternoon, and they're actually starting to dig into the competition pool. 90% of the concrete work on the pool house, the building, will be completed tomorrow, if the weather holds out. And as far as I know, talking to Russell Contracting, that the schedule is on pace to be completed on time, and there have been no major changes or surprises, as we knock on wood, which is a good thing. I also started a conversation with the city, the Winooski Housing, about the senior center and how we can get the senior center, instead of having missed opportunity there, to see if we can get some more members involved, some more of the Winooski Housing people involved. And that's in the very beginning stages, so stay tuned. I have more to report on the senior center in the future.
Awesome, thank you. With that, let's move into our regular items. The first thing we have on the agenda is a resolution honoring a longtime member of our community who has just contributed decades of service. Rita Martell, born and raised in Winooski, you'll hear more in a moment. Will be leaving our city soon, but still be involved, and we wanted to take some time to recognize you. Would you like to come up so I can read your resolution? Whatever you're comfortable with. All right. Whereas the city of Winooski is proud to acknowledge the legacy of community service and the leadership of Rita Martell, and whereas Rita Martell served as the president of the Winooski Historical Society for over 20 years, continues to serve as the vice president and host tours and open houses, and whereas Rita Martell was integrally involved in the publishing of the first formal history devoted solely to Winooski, the first printed photographic history of Winooski, a printed English translation of the early history of Winooski's Franco-American community, and the Winooski Historical Society's quarterly newsletter bulletin. And whereas Rita Martell has also volunteered for Meals on Wheels, the Champlain Valley Agency on Aging, and the Vermont Association for the Blind and Vision Impaired. And whereas Rita Martell has held a number of volunteer positions with the Winooski Senior Center. And whereas Rita Martell co-founded Advocates for Better Care, an effort for which she was awarded 1999 Vermont Elder of the Year. And whereas Rita Martell has regularly participated in Operation Bloom, beautifying city space with bright flowers. And whereas Rita Martell is a consistent participant in public meetings and conversation, gives generously of her historic knowledge and wisdom, and is seen as a resource by many. Now therefore be it resolved that the residents of Winooski have immeasurably benefited from Rita Martell's contributions to the city, and we acknowledge that the city is not only losing a leader, but a beloved neighbor and community member.
was very fortunate to have been born here in Winooski 88 and a half years ago. And my heart is still here. And I would go on and tell you more, but I know you have too much on your agenda. So please excuse me. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. After we sign the resolution later, we will be presenting you with a copy. And I only met you in the last couple of years, Rita, but I've been very impressed. I see you around it, just contributing all the time. I'm very happy to have gotten to know you. And glad to hear that you'll still be coming around the city, though your residents may not be here. And thank you for folks who came out to recognize her as well with us. Moving on to less exciting things. Just kidding, Joe. Our next item is the appointment of Joe Peron to the Planning Commission. Would you like to come up briefly? So, Joe Peron was appointed as an alternate to our Planning Commission last fall. I'm not sure how long it's been.
I lose track of time. I've been active with the Planning Commission for a little while now.
Yes, and Joe was coming to meetings for a long time anyhow and contributing. There have been some changes in membership, and the commission would like to appoint Joe to instead of alternate, to the full-time seat, filling a role that has recently been vacated. Joe brings a lot of historical knowledge of the city of Winooski, and his history in general. Is there anything that you want to share? How has your time been since you officially joined?
You know, it's the best hour a week I spent. It really is. Like, as far as the information shared about the city, I walk away from a richer person every time. So I'm very grateful to be able to serve with the Planning Commission. And it really is wonderful to hear some of the issues that I see in the city being talked about and discussed in a thoughtful way. So I'm very grateful for that time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Any questions from the public? All right, we thank you for your service thus far and are excited to have you continue. I would entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Joe Peron to the Planning Commission.
So
Motion by Amy, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to honor Rita's wonderful legacy. I really appreciate it.
We're happy to do so.
Can we take just a 3-minute recess to congratulate?
Yeah. I will call a 3-minute recess. We will reconvene at 6:21. We have to wait. Motion carries. The resolution is approved.
Who made the motion? Who seconded?
I made the motion.
I second.
There we go. Very good.
I was too excited. And it's been so long since we had a meeting.
Has been a hot second.
That seemed like forever.
Yes. Okay, I'll call us back to order then. We will reconvene the city council meeting now. Thank you. All right, we are now on to item C, which is potential approval of appointments to the Green Mountain Transit Board. I would like to call up Austin Davis and Marcy Ryan, please. Welcome. So, so thank you for coming. The city of Winooski provides a representative to the Green Mountain Transit Board to speak for us on our behalf for public transit in the area. Ray and I interviewed a couple of appointees. He is evidently not here this year. He's on vacation. Ray had been serving as the alternate on the commission and knows a lot more about it than I do. But anyhow, we have selected Austin to serve as our first appointment and Marcy to serve as our alternate appointment. Austin comes to us from the Chamber of Commerce. He also resides in Winooski, and I think you recently bought a home here, right?
Yeah.
And used to be a daily writer, is now a little bit less involved, but has some good ideas about the future of transit and how to work within what's going on with the Chamber of Commerce. Marcy is a Winooski resident who is a daily writer and also experiences using SSTA and trying to use the system as a disabled user, and has sounds like a lot of very good connections in the community and does a lot of outreach and community engagement. So Ray and I were very excited about both of them and the viewpoints that they could bring. I would give you each a moment to talk about what you're excited about in serving in this role.
Me first. I started working on this in the 70s when I was in college, so I'm curious to see how it's changed with GMTA instead of being CCTA alone, since it's become a combined board, and to see how it works. It's hopefully better with SSTA, because it's not really functioning that well. Hopefully we can make it work better than it was. You next.
I welcome the opportunity to get more involved in the Winooski community. As you said, I'm a newer resident. Just bought a home on West Spring Street with my wife last April. I rode the Montpelier Link Express for the first few years of my career out of college. Made a huge difference, not having to buy or purchase a car right out of college, and instead being able to use that as a resource to get some of my early internships and then some of my first jobs. I still ride it somewhat frequently. I'd like to ride it more if we can make it more dependable. So that'd be something I really am interested in, bringing access and dependability to the service, because ultimately that's what keeps people using it. In my previous role, in my current role, I hear from employers frequently about issues that they have and issues of dependability that keep their employees from using the bus system. So I'm excited to bring that perspective. And in my previous employment, I worked with a trade association that worked with clean energy in the state, solar, wind, hydro, but as well as electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and some of the early electric buses we had a hand in. So really excited to see how GMT is taking up that charge that Vermont voters have brought to them and fulfilling it.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council for our appointees? I believe your applications and such were included in the packet, so. Any questions from the public? Right. Well, I know Ray and I were both excited that you're both vocal, and we think you'll do a good job, advocating for the needs of our residents. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the appointments of Austin Davis and Marcy Ryan.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. You are both our new appointees. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ray will be in touch with you to help get you started.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is an event permit for West Street Block Party, which Heather will join us for.
I'm also inviting Dakota Brizendine up, as she is the one who runs this and is the brains behind it, so she'll be helpful up here.
Welcome.
So staff has received an event permit application for the 6th annual West Street Block Party, and this event includes a street closure on West Street between River and Elm Street, so that's why we require City Council approval. That closure will be from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday, August 31st, and this event is done in partnership with the Winooski Police Department, who comes out and they grill burgers, and all of the neighbors come out and they do a meet and greet. So it's been a great community building event in the past, and staff recommends approval for the event. And is there anything new this year, Dakota, or is it basically
Pretty much,
the same?
yeah. We've got it down to a science by now. Yeah. No, nothing new. Just we partner with the Winooski Police, and Rick typically gets a bouncy house for the little kids, and they grill out, and neighbors bring food. So it's a good time.
I've heard much about this over the years. I'm excited to actually attend this year because I will be in town every weekend. I'm curious how this got started, how you pulled it together. Like, I feel like other neighborhoods could learn how to do this themselves too.
I think it really came together just initially. Folks, I grew up in Winooski, but we bought a house on West Street in my adult life with my 2 kids, and I sort of see people around, and everyone says oh, we should get together sometime, or you see your neighbors in the summer, but you don't really connect, and then years would go by and no one would connect, and so finally one year we said, let's do a block party, let's make this happen, and so a few of us sort of just got together and figured out what was required. I don't even know how we got involved with the police. I think Rick heard about it and reached out and said he'd be willing to donate hamburgers and hot dogs for the event, which was great. And so the first year was a little, quiet and rickety, but then we kind of pulled it together, and each year it's kind of grown. And last year we had a fantastic turnout, and a lot of people brought food, and there was flower crowns being made and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's just kind of grown over the years, and I just have my kids hand out flyers along the street to let people know that it's happening, and people kind of show up with what they show up with.
Nice. Yeah, and just for the public's information, it's not just for West Street residents. It's
open to everyone. So that's good.
Any questions from council?
Do most of your neighbors from West Street, do most people attend it, or is it more from other places?
I would say a majority of our neighbors attend. I think, I don't know how to calculate it in a number. I'm not even sure how many people live on the street, but I would say the more attend than don't, probably. And it is a little bit of an inconvenience shutting down the street for the folks that live on the street, but we have it open for people to get in and out if they need to, and it's never seemed to be an issue in the past. So
I'm going to say there's nothing negative that's been from it either, so.
Not that we've heard.
Good.
But.
Is this the 5th year?
This is actually, I think, the fifth year.
The 5th year?
Yeah.
Well, good job. That's good to see people doing that stuff in our city, because not every neighbor knows every neighbor. It's a great way to introduce people or just get together. So, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Any questions from the public? All right. So I would entertain a motion to approve the event permit for the West Street Block Party.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you there.
Yes.
Please.
The next item for our agenda is discussion of year-end reporting from our treasurer, Alex Anastasi-Hill.
Good evening, City Council. How are you today?
Good, go ahead.
Just on a kind of a very light overview, the city, Winooski, I can report confidently that the city, through the 2018-2019 fiscal year, retains its healthy financial status. With a little bit of luck, we'll be there for another 88 and a half years. Though the operating revenue accounts are continuing to drip a little bit lower, the expenses across all departments were impressively under budget, so that's something that all department heads and the city staff should be proud of. Just generally across the board. Along with that, all deficits have in quarter 2 and quarter 3 were already recognized, so there are no sudden changes in quarter 4 that the city council or staff should be concerned about. Reviewing just the general fund, initially it appears that there is a deficit of $181,000, but $259,000 was invested back into the city, including costs for the equity summit, fire department equipment. So really at an operational level, the general fund operated at a surplus of $78,000. And then reviewing enterprise funds kind of as a whole, there's a lot of non-operational activity going on related to the spinner place settlement and so forth, where there's a lot of up and downs. But across the board, they kind of operated at a break-even level, which I think is a good goal for the city, because we're not really trying to accrue revenue from the city. We're trying to return it back into the citizens. Does the council have any questions? There's a lot of little in and outs, and if there's any details that need to be investigated, I'm happy to do so.
I had a question about the parking tickets, and this is probably not necessarily for you, but just the city in general. One of the things that popped out to me was that parking tickets are down 17,000. Just was curious if we think that's a good thing or a not so good thing, and why that is so off from where we projected we would be.
I had noted it. Typically within one quarter, if it's suddenly a surprise, I don't raise it as a concern. Parking in general has been down the past couple quarters, but not significantly enough for me to say something needs to change or this is something that's under our control. I think naturally you're going to have ebbs and flows throughout the year. But I have noted it, and it's something that in the next report I will follow up on that as well and see if something has changed drastically. But if Jesse has any other
so from an operation perspective, we had a vacancy in one of our parking enforcement officers for about 3 months over the winter. So there were a number of hours each week that were not covered by enforcement. So you do see some ticket issuance decline during those kinds of staffing vacancies. We're fully staffed now, and in fact, we have slightly adjusted how we staff to cover more hours of the enforcement week. So I anticipate that will tick back up, but I do think for Alex's suggestion, it's a good thing to look at seasonally in the new year as compared to the past year to see how that ticket issuance proceeds forward. I also, if Chief Audie were here, what he would say is that we really do focus more on education than enforcement. So the tickets that are issued are clearly people who are knowingly in violation, but we also issue a fair amount of warnings and educational material on first and second offenses to ensure that people understand our systems before we kind of take that heavy-handed enforcement approach. Additionally, with some of the Park Mobile implementation, and Chief Audie and Angela are working on upgrading our kiosks to touch screens. We believe that we have some really good customer service improvements coming, so hopefully the whole system will be more user-friendly. And if that is true, in theory, we should see ticket issuance continue to decrease with parking revenues increase.
Thank you.
Sorry for that kind of long-winded.
No, thank you, that's helpful.
Any other questions from council? Any questions from the public? All right, well, thank you for your continued diligent reporting for us, Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, I know I'm usually kind of on the back end, but kind of certify that things are boring, which is good.
Yes, that's what we like to do.
Thank you, Alex.
So our next item on the agenda will be commission liaison appointments. Jesse, you put together a nice chart for us.
Sure, so the mayor and I were interested in just, we had made liaison assignments with the old commission structure, but with the revamped commission structure, we wanted to give you an opportunity to just revisit those liaison assignments and clarify them, so as we move forward into this new model, everyone's on the same page.
So I guess my first question would be for folks who are already assigned, if you are looking to stick with where you're at, or if you're looking for a change.
I think I would say it would make sense for Hal and I to stay on the same commission, so I'd be looking to move to a different commission.
And how would you want to maintain the Safe, Healthy, Connected one?
I'm very flexible, so, however, I'm interested in the charter, so, however that plays out.
And Mike?
I'm good with Public Works. I think that's.
Municipal infrastructure.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
And Amy, you're not really a commission liaison, but
Right,
you're downtown and administrative roles?
yeah. Yeah, so I'd be happy to hop on any of these that need a liaison.
I obviously will be sticking with Planning Commission, that is per the charter. How I would like to see you on the Charter Commission, I think given your experience already in that work and in your role as rep.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think that would work for me.
Sure.
I personally would like to take on the Finance Commission. Is anyone itching to get at that?
Not so much.
I would say though that because of my commission load, I think that there is an opportunity for someone else to step in on the Housing Commission. I might punt that to either of you, given the Safe, Healthy, Connected scenario.
Yeah, I would be interested in the Housing Commission. I don't know if you have a strong feeling or not about housing or Safe, Healthy, Connected, or if we can.
I can stay and see healthy, it's okay. So,
Do you feel that that you can do two commissions, or is any need for assistance on the Safe, Healthy?
And I've been on the reconfigure Safe Healthy for, a couple years, so that's fine. Yep.
Did we just slot them all then?
So can I repeat them to,
Yeah.
and see if I understand, make sure I'm, Planning Commission, the mayor, Safe, Healthy, Connected People, Hal, Municipal Infrastructure, Mike, Finance, the mayor, Housing, Jim, Charter, Hal, Downtown, Winooski, Amy, Administrative Liaison, Amy.
That sounds right.
Is that, everyone agree? Excellent, thank you.
While we're on this topic though, I need to bring up that we had discussed previously about sending somebody to represent us at the airport commission meetings, even though we don't have an official role there right now. These meetings take place the third Wednesday of the month at 4 p.m. So I think there's one this Wednesday, but we will all be at the school. We don't need to make a commitment at the moment, but I wanted to, so this could be a role that one of us fills. We could also look for an interested community member. So I want to put it out there to see if anybody is particularly interested in following the airport happenings, or if you know someone in the community that you think is, and then we could talk about, it's not really an appointment because we don't have an official role, but we could kind of firm that up at the next meeting we have.
Actually, I'm interested. I have a long-time relationship with Gene Richards, so.
Oh, interesting, okay.
Yeah, I would be, happy to serve that way.
Does anyone else love airport information?
And I'd certainly be happy to be a backup if you aren't able to make it, or share
okay.
information if
Yeah.
that helps.
That sounds great.
It's a useful
Mhm.
kind of backstop.
Cool. Let's talk more about that, and I can get more information to you about those meetings. It did look like, looking at their previous agendas, they only last about an hour usually, so that's exciting.
Power meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Jesse, you had mentioned that after this assignment, that the staff liaisons would be in touch with us about new membership. I think the other thing to consider is, as we have discussed since the strategy and policy meeting that we had about creating kind of work plans to give these commissions goals for the year. I have actually worked with Planning Commission and Housing already on theirs. Staff is prepared to, so it's the staff and council liaison supporting the chair of each commission. So as the membership is firmed up, you'll have an opportunity to help support the commission chair, create that role. Staff will be there to support you, and I would also just like to offer myself as well to help if need be. But you might not be taking that on quite immediately, as we should be doing more appointments at our next meeting, I imagine.
Yeah, how has that, you said earlier that it's been they've been coming in strongly. Is that, I mean, the numbers there for each commission, or is there one leaning more for one, or?
So they're all a little different in that they're for the commissions that have previous commissions.
Yep.
Public Works, for example, there's a pretty strong membership already and people who are interested in continuing to serve. So we know who of those current commissioners are interested in being reappointed. And then there are some new applicants as well. So I think the staff's idea is to bring you new applicants to interview, and then to take into consideration new applicants and those currently serving who are interested in continuing. I think from the staff perspective, there is some interest in having some continuity where people have been serving and are interested in continuing to serve. For the Charter Commission, I believe we have about 7 applicants. For finance, we have 2 applicants for finance. So that is somewhere where we would seek your help in, getting the word out about that commission and that opportunity. I think for all the other commissions, we have at least enough to fill a commission with a few more applicants in some cases. Does that answer your question, Mike?
It does. Now, the other thing is, if we have, say, for example, the 7 for the charter, if we pick there's 5 members and 2 alternates?
Yep.
So all of them can possibly come on charter commission?
If we get no more applicants, yeah.
If we don't, and if we approve it. Now, would it make sense to see if they want to, if we're not going to pick them for that one commission, if they would be interested in going to another commission?
Yeah.
Is that something we can?
We actually did that with another candidate for GMT that we didn't select as a finalist. And I think she ended up applying for one of our other commissions. So it's absolutely a good idea if somebody's interested in serving.
Well, I just don't want to miss any opportunity with volunteers, because if someone volunteers, it says something about the individual, so.
Yeah.
And the liaisons and the staff will have opportunities to have conversations with everyone who's applied and to send exactly that message of, if this isn't right for you, is there another commission? But I do encourage you, especially for finance, I guess, these are policy extension arms of you all. So if there are folks in the community who you often, we know in the social science research that people, especially women and people of color, don't apply for things unless they're directly invited to participate. So if you know people in the community who you think would be good voices at our shared tables, I'd really encourage you to do some direct outreach. We don't, on the staff side, we do that when we're kind of having active conversations, but we don't see it as, we see it as a little bit intruding into your policy world to recruit heavily like that, whereas it really is your policy role to, pull the voices in that you want to see at those tables.
So if you know anyone that's super into finance or any of these other.
I'm thinking if Alex or Angela have friends that.
I know, that was my thought too.
Let them apply.
Are there any questions from the public on commission liaison appointments? Robert? Do we have to vote on that? Yeah, Jesus. We haven't had a meeting in a month and I have really gotten rusty.
Well, we're not at the vote yet, though, are we? With public comment.
Well, that's true, see? Thanks, Mike.
You're gonna save the mayor.
You're right.
You're throwing me off.
I have a question before we get into
Yeah,
the
sure.
airport appointment.
We're not really voting on that one. But.
No, but do you think it makes sense to do it like a 1 month one person does it next month, just so we all kind of get involved with the airport? Would that make sense, or just you want one continuous person?
No, we could try that as a new approach, because it's not an appointment, right? Right now, we're just sending a person.
Well, and
To
just
stay
because,
involved.
I don't want to put too much on someone's plate either.
I like that idea, Mike. I will get the schedule and get you all looped in. And then whoever goes that month can bring the update back to
Bring the
us.
update,
table,
and then it takes some off someone's plate, and like Hal's would be involved too, same with James, so.
Hal likes to serve on.
I love serving.
Any other comments, questions?
Can I ask one
Oh, yeah.
slightly related? I just was wondering if there's been any more discussion about moving the night of the commission meetings. I think we talked about that a while ago. I don't remember the disposition of that.
We haven't.
Would that be kind of up to the commissions? The people
Yeah.
they meet?
I feel like that's a conversation we'll want to re-engage in as they become established. So like finance and charter obviously don't have a night yet. We do have nights that these other commissions have been meeting, but they can also vote to change that, which has happened in the past as like member schedules have changed. I think that, something I've been thinking about is approaching that by first doing, like trying one meeting, like trying it once, seeing how it goes, like maybe it's a biannual or quarterly approach at first, just to feel it out before we commit to trying to make that work. What are y'all's thoughts?
Well, I wonder if we were to be proactive and have a suggestive way to do this, it could attract commission members who might benefit from childcare or whatever, if we were able to have a benefit like that, because we have everyone together. So I wonder if that could have an impact on who actually steps up.
It
So-
could, but we haven't actually allocated any funding to do
Right.
childcare at this point.
Right, but it's something we talked about in terms
Yeah.
of having an equitable participation in it for folks who might not consider it because they have challenges around those issues.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I just wonder.
What if, after, like, the new commissions are established, what if we have an initial meeting with all of them? Like, maybe their first one, their orientation was all together?
Like a whole meeting with everyone here, and then we can kind of discuss each commission?
Maybe.
Or,
I do
Or-
think, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
no, or maybe we just go with the schedules we have, and then we meet and just see if that works for everyone at that particular meeting night. Like the charter, say it's the second Monday of the month, they have their meeting, does this work for everybody? Well, I have baseball practice or hockey, can we do it on Tuesdays? Or my partner isn't home on Mondays, could we do it Tuesdays? We can get a consensus that way by having our first meetings and making sure everyone can make it. Because I've only been to a few public works meetings, but partly because some of them, there hasn't been a quorum. And I think plus it was middle of summer too. It's hard to get everyone together on a particular night. But I think if we set a schedule and have our first meetings, I think it's up to the chair to say, does this night work for everyone? If it does, boom, it's done. And I don't know if we need to have everyone.
I could see having the existing schedule available and saying, there is value if we can get some of these on the same night. Does that work for you? But that is a good point too. Like the flip side, there's no winning. We have the specific volunteers we have, and then what if the one night we pick doesn't work for them? That's also and maybe it comes down to like 2 nights, or like there's a couple that can meet at the same time potentially.
If you sign up for something, I think that first initial meeting, you need to be there regardless.
Yeah.
You signed up for it, this is the night it is. It doesn't mean it needs to be set in stone. We're all adults, we can make or, we can make a schedule. And I think that's up to the chair to to do at the meeting. Is this a good night on the month for everyone? And then I think whoever, whether it's the mayor or the city, comes up with a date for the finance and charter, then have that first initial meeting and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, then that's the time for the chair to huddle up and make that schedule work.
We also have to consider the city staff liaison and council liaison's availability as well.
And that's can all happen at the same meeting too, I think.
I like the idea of a pilot at some point in the next year before the next round of work planning and reappointments or appointments would happen. I think that would be a good, at least to try it out and see if there's value and see if maybe it would be a more intentional event where you are doing some cross commission sharing, but then also some individual work. I think would be nice to create those connections. But I also, we've actually posted dates that these commissions meet. People may be applying because they can do those dates, and we don't want to jeopardize the participation at this point. But if with enough warning, and if it happens in the winter instead of the summer, we might be able to get good attendance at a cross-commission meeting.
That's a good point too. Summer versus winter availability.
Yeah. Well, that could be noted too at the interview process, that these nights aren't set in stone, or we can put it on the application saying this is the schedule for the first meeting. And I think you need to get the people together and see what schedule works for everyone. And I mean, the second, like municipal, second Thursday might not work for everybody. It might not work for the chair or myself. But that first meeting, I think, everyone should be able to make a first meeting, especially if you apply for something and you get accepted. So you have that first meeting, then the people organize themselves. Let them, it's their commission. Let them make their own schedule if they want.
Yeah, I think that just being able to have the information that these are the other scheduled meetings and maybe want to consider that is good to keep in mind as well. But we could come back with go on.
I think one of you just had lots of good ideas in there, but I want to pull out a specific idea, which is a group orientation. So if we went off the pilot idea sometime into the new commission structure, so the work plans were developed and they had some kind of group cohesion and were off and running, and then somewhere a midpoint kind of check into the master plan implementation point. But if we could preface that, for me, it would be easier to preface that piloting with offering a group orientation opportunity. So not necessarily all of the commissions meeting together, but saying, we've revamped the commission structure, you've been appointed, we'd love to have you come in and get a briefing on the master plan, get a briefing on the council staff relationship, get a briefing on some of these major projects that cross commissions, the CIP planning, the pool, Main Street, obviously sits in municipal infrastructure, but also is going to touch finance. The charter is going to, I think, touch all of the other commissions. That might be a good opportunity, not necessarily to have a joint meeting do work, but here's the same information and set some kind of larger group dynamics. So if that's something if we think about it as a pilot year where we do a whole all commissions orientation, say in the end of September, middle of October as an orientation, and then in 6 months do but I think Jim, you were suggesting a all-in meeting kind of halfway through before we get to renewing the work plans or updating the work plans, that might be a good way to kind of pilot this concept in the first year. That
seems like a good distillation.
Yeah, I like that.
Thanks, Jesse.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments on commission liaison assignments? I'm moving to that. Thank you for bringing that up, though, that we have been having this conversation for a while and need to make some progress here.
Thanks for the discussion.
So, on that note, I would entertain a motion to approve the commission liaison appointments as Jesse stated them earlier.
So moved.
Yeah.
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is a discussion item. This is a recommendation from the Housing Commission on structures for an affordable housing trust fund. So Heather will be joining along with some of our Housing Commission members. Jessica and Robert, thank you for coming.
So I'm bringing up a couple members of the Housing Commission because this is about 6 months of work that we'll be talking about, and I can't guarantee that I will remember every discussion that we had. So while I will introduce it, we're all here to answer questions, and I'm sure there are many questions. Just for background, an Affordable Housing Trust Fund was established by a City Council resolution on Monday, January 7th of this year. And as written and approved, the resolution allocated the full amount of a pre-existing housing improvement loan program, about $348,000, to the Housing Trust Fund, with the Housing Improvement Program to continue operating with a portion of the funds under the umbrella of the Housing Trust Fund. So over their last 6 meetings, the Housing Commission has been developing the policies and procedures for the Housing Trust Fund. And a draft of that is in your packet. So we can take input and discuss what we have there. Just for people who are not familiar with the Housing Trust Fund, the purpose of the Housing Trust Fund is to promote, create, retain, and improve affordable housing options for low and moderate income households. And the structure is an umbrella fund that provides loans and grants through 3 distinct programs. Those are a construction rehabilitation program, which we're referring to as the CORE program. And that program is available to professional real estate developers, both for-profit and nonprofit. And public housing agencies are also encouraged to apply for this program when they're constructing or substantially rehabilitating housing for low-income persons, including home ownership and rental properties. The second piece of the program is the Housing Improvement Program that pre-existed, although we've substantially rewritten the program guidelines for that. That's for moderate income owner occupants of single family homes and multifamily properties. They're encouraged to apply for this program when rehabilitating properties, providing homes for low to moderate income households. And the third piece is a down payment assistance program. That's for low to moderate income first-time home buyers, and they're encouraged to apply for this program for assistance with a down payment or a closing cost of a first-time home purchase in Winooski. So I'm going to leave it there. That's just the basic background, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions. I'm sure there are little pieces that we've taken on faith in 6 months of discussions that I noticed actually Jim brought to my attention, and I also noticed today that we hadn't mentioned that the Housing Improvement Program is for moderate income or below owner occupants, but it's something we've been discussing all along, so I'm sure there are many pieces in here that we can improve upon. So I would be happy to take questions.
So it looks like the initial amount for the fund will be $348,000.
Correct.
So what would be the ideal amount in order to be as effective as possible to carry out the mission?
$200 million.
It's like, wow, she's got a number.
Just right there with her. I didn't bring all of that. I brought some of that. So an ideal amount would be a lot more than what we have. I mean, I'd love to see this in the millions, and one of the pieces of our work plan for the Housing Commission over the next year, which we approved at our last meeting, is to look at potential funding sources and potential funding models for the Housing Trust Fund. So that could be grants, that could be an annual allocation, that could be a penny for housing on the tax rate. There are a wide variety of different ways that we could do that. So we will certainly be looking at ways to expand that. We've done some, in our last meeting, we looked at some preliminary modeling of what some of the decisions we've made in this document mean in terms of how much funding is available and how many units we could cover with it. So some of those different models showed with the initial funds, we could cover, depending on the structure, 21 initial units, up to, I believe it was 33 units was the highest number of units that we could potentially fund with that initial before it revolves. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert.
I would just say, having been a part of most of this process, there's a lot in here. There's a lot of numbers and criteria I think it's probably a lot to take in at your first viewing. But I know from having sat in on these discussions, I've seen the commission members spend a lot of time being thoughtful about what these criteria mean and how, you know, what the real impact could be. We never know all of the possible outcomes, but there's been a lot of discussion about trying to make sure that those priorities are always in mind, that we are helping, you know, we haven't lost the initial intent of the home improvement program. We're helping folks with affordability issues. We're trying to add affordable housing as well as improve existing housing stock and help increase home ownership. There's also, and I can't remember how this specifically plays out, but I know there's been some discussion about how this program can also help support socioeconomic integration. I know that's something that has come up in discussions as well.
Yeah, that's in the priority criteria. We have a point scale which gives higher point values on page 3 for putting affordable housing in block groups within the city that don't have as much affordable housing. So we've done an analysis of that and come up with, you get higher point scores if you're putting it in places that people don't have access to.
Along those lines, because I noticed it was specifically called out the block groups, and I was wondering if that's something that could be converted to kind of like if the goal is to have some target for the highest median income with lowest affordability, because that could shift in 5 years. So rather than having our block groups explicitly called out, if that could be done by kind of what the intent is behind it, so that if it changes those block groups, we don't have to update the whole policy to do that.
It's our intention to review this on an annual basis because part of our work plan is also to be tracking outcomes. And so we'll be looking at it annually and coming back with any changes that we may need to make to this document in order to improve those outcomes. So I think at least for the first few years, until we're sure of what's coming in, what our actual applicant pool looks like, and whether the funds are performing, I think we'll have to be adjusting it annually.
This might be getting a little bit ahead, but are there any best practices, or have you all thought about how you will verify folks' income to meet those thresholds so that we're not putting a burden on someone that does have income sensitivity?
So it's our intention. We have previously had a memorandum of understanding with Champlain Housing Trust to do compliance monitoring on our previous home improvement program. We'll have to do, that was quite some time ago that we put that MOU in place. I think it was, the Opportunities Credit Union one is from 2008. And I think CHT is from maybe 2012. So we'll have to do, as next steps on this, an attorney review of the entire thing, a new memorandum of understanding with Opportunities Credit Union, and a new memorandum of understanding with Champlain Housing Trust. But they do offer for a small fee compliance monitoring that they will do for landlords. And so we'll require that as part of this. So more to come on that.
Thank you.
So with regards to the review process, looks like the Housing Commission will be serving as the loan committee,
Yes.
review committee. And any thoughts about how you might try to mitigate implicit bias? Is there any training that you might consider so folks are all on the same page to be fair and equitable?
I think that's a really good idea. In part, having the evaluation criteria is about removing that implicit bias. So we strictly go by these point scales, and we've already, before we're ever looking at any applicant, we've already determined what are the things that score highest. So that helps with it, but I also think that trainings would be a useful piece, and certainly we're open to involving our Housing Commission in those trainings. And then there's a second level with us making recommendations to City Council. So again, the equity lens that we are trying to develop as the city as a whole is also important at the council level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
On that note, the way this is set up, are you able to go through this review process without having the personal information of the applicant in front of you?
Yeah, that's
It's
interesting.
like a blind,
Yeah, exactly.
blind
Yeah.
site.
It's the clinician.
Potentially.
Yeah, I think there's a way to redact that.
Mhm.
Certainly. I think we would have to develop a system for how we would do that, but yes, I think that's something worth consideration.
One thing I was thinking in terms of access on this, or two questions I had. One is on the requirement that the applicant attend the city council meeting in order to apply for this loan, and if that, if the kind of the real expertise is going to be in the housing commission to vet the applicant and application. I guess I'm wondering what the value is of having them attend this meeting, and then B, if it makes it harder for that person to consider applying because they know they'll have to come to a Monday night meeting in a venue they may not be familiar or comfortable with. So have you thought about, is that possible to move that in-person meeting to the housing commission? What would be the downside of doing that?
I don't think there is a downside on doing that. Personally, I feel like probably we came up with it. I will say that came up mainly thinking of the larger developers coming in and doing that and having skin in the game and meeting with council. It's very different when you're looking to do an improvement to your home. And certainly it feels much more vulnerable and confidential to have that conversation. So I see no benefit of having a homeowner come to council specifically.
So it's possible to split the HPA
Yeah,
and
I think we could split that.
Okay. And then similarly on access, has there been any discussion about support services? Again, I'm thinking for the HIP and the DPA loans to support translation services, language barriers, anything that might make it easier for people to apply that aren't kind of corporate developers.
Yeah, I mean, I think primarily you're looking at it. I think that I will be providing that support as much as possible, but certainly as we develop application materials, which again is another of the next steps, we will have very simplified promotional and application materials for each of these programs, completely separate application materials and promotional materials, and they will be at a minimum, there will be the bigger points will be translated on those, just to draw people in and give them a name to talk to. From there, I think you're looking at it.
Okay. Can I ask one other question?
Please, you
Of
can
course.
ask.
Thank you.
No, you can't.
Sorry, I'm done. No, I'm just kidding. The one, and I think Heather and you and I talked about this a little bit, is the affordability terms on the home improvement loan program. Are limited to 2 years no matter what. So if someone borrows the money for 5 years, they have to, or forever long, they have to keep the unit or their house affordable for 2 years, and then they can change the rental rate. I guess I'm just curious what because I know the core program is tied to the length of the loan, so they have to maintain the affordability as long as the loan is out. So why that wouldn't be translated to the HIP, the home improvement loan, why that 2 year extent is called out.
Yeah, I think when we had the discussions, and I will turn it over to the two of you to discuss as well, but when we had the discussion, that was specifically discussed, and one of the issues that we were looking at was the affordability for the homeowner, because we're trying to maintain affordability for the 42% of our duplex units that are owner occupied. So it's also about creating ongoing affordability for them, not just for the person who's renting. And we didn't want to disincentivize people from making those improvements to their properties, and wanted to allow them to maintain their own affordability. So I certainly think that could be tied to the length of the loan, and it's a reasonable approach. That would, on average, the loans that have been made through the HIP program in the past are paid back. The ones that have been paid back, and they haven't all been paid back, but in looking at that, it was about 8 years. So that would be probably the period that we'd be looking at. Other thoughts from that discussion? Because the Housing Commission did specifically say they wanted to keep it at the 2 years.
It's very possible that I was on maternity leave at this meeting. Because that was 3 months long, and so I'm almost positive that I was, because I don't recall why we limited that to 2 years. So I don't feel like it's fair for me to answer.
I think
Heather pretty much got it, because I think that was the end result of the discussion, was trying to avoid the disincentivizing. You know, the improvement is still something that we want to see in a lot of these rental units. You know, tying it back to the rental registry and things of that nature, and not giving a landlord another reason not to fix the property. But I mean, it's difficult to decide these things.
Yeah, I guess I would say that it feels uncomfortable to me because I could see a situation where someone takes a loan out and does the improvements. It's an 8-year loan, and they're basically benefiting from city dollars that then takes the unit out of affordability after 2 years and leaves it unaffordable for 6 years at those medium income levels. So I think I would be interested to see that kind of gamed out in a couple different scenarios, to know that whether the disincentive would be strong enough to be worth the risk that we would lose that affordability basically while we still have money out on the table to try and promote it.
Certainly, we can bring that up and have that conversation at the next meeting.
And I think if there's any like standards or what you've seen demonstrated in other communities with this kind of program.
It varies wildly.
Yeah.
Wildly. Yeah, we've looked at a lot of precedents, and across the board, there's huge variation. So we tried to base it on existing precedent. The 2 years was pretty short.
What else, Jim?
Glad you know. I have one more question though. I promise I'll stop. Just thinking about kind of implementation and kind of the feasibility of being the loan review committee, being the housing commission. I know some of the things in there, like standards that determining that something's about to fail within 5 years, or that an improvement will provide an accommodation for someone with a disability. Do you anticipate any challenges in having the technical expertise to know if someone shows you a picture and says this is going to fail in 5 years, I need a loan to fix it, that's verifying the statements of the applicant, or that you can, I guess, do you anticipate any problems with that? Do you think that the commission's set up to do that well? Do you need any support in order to be able to make those determinations? Is it coming primarily from the rental registry? Just kind of curious about some of those kind of verification and kind of assessment pieces that would go into that review.
I think we'll be working very closely with the rental registry and code enforcement. So specifically, I expect that we will be giving out flyers to people when code enforcement comes and says, look, you know, this is failing, you have to do something about it. Hey, here's the home improvement program. So making ourselves a resource to people who are receiving that kind of code compliance issue. I think that's primarily how we're trying to target our efforts. And certainly, with a small staff like we have, it's very easy for me to confirm with code enforcement, you know, what level of concern something is.
Okay. Because I'm thinking more from the other direction, where my garage door isn't up to my liking anymore, and I say that's about to fall down and break something because it's going to fail. Like, I'm more worried about that side of things, that people co-op in the program for issues that may not come up in the rental registry because they're a single-family homeowner. They aren't showing up in the rental registry at all.
Yeah.
So is that something where similarly can reach out to code enforcement and say, hey, someone said this, does that seem reasonable?
Certainly there are resources to talk to. I would not bill us as experts in this, but I think there are reasonable expectations that we can do due diligence.
Okay, thanks.
I got one thing actually, since you brought the code up. I didn't see anything in here as if someone goes and gets the loan, gets approved for a home improvement, and they start ripping into their house, and they have a permit. Say they have a duplex, they have to pull a permit. Code enforcement, code inspector comes in and says, well, this isn't up to code. There's no code update section in this. Is there room for that? Just, I mean, that would be, especially if someone owns it, if someone's trying to make a triplex safer, an older one, and then the inspector comes in and says, well, this isn't up to code, needs to be fixed. And you have to fix it for them in order then to close the permit out. I didn't see anything in this draft. I don't know if there's room for that. Or
I think, of course, there's always room for that, but I guess I would leave code enforcement to code enforcement, and the policy for the Housing Trust Fund to being policy, and maybe I'm not understanding completely.
They go in,
So can I
sure.
clarify?
Jump
Are
in.
you asking if, so they get a home improvement loan,
Mhm.
say for $10,000,
Yeah.
and then they start the work, and then they realize it's gonna cost $20,000, is there an opportunity to go back and
Correct.
apply for additional
For
funds?
code updates that are stuff that's unforeseen when you start doing renovation, that as a contractor, that always comes into play when you're doing remodeling.
You rip it open and there's asbestos in there.
Well, that's a huge issue too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, that is not something that we've written in here, but we certainly could come up with some kind of policy to address that specifically.
just to help cover them, because if they can't finish, then
Yeah,
they might be
stuck
up the
between a
creek.
rock and a hard
Yeah.
place, having tried to fix something.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's room for us to write something in about that.
Yeah, I think it's something that we can look at. I think the other issue that could come up with that is going back the money issue. I mean, we only have so much.
Yeah, so much, right.
Right.
So saying, oh, we'll find you another $10,000, it might not be something that we can commit to.
No, not something we can commit to, but I think something that we could look at having some sort of policy.
Reasonable
Yeah,
way to
reasonable.
review.
Mhm.
Would it make sense, and this may be a topic to discuss at one of our meetings, not here, but to have a member of code enforcement potentially preemptively visit the property?
That's a good idea.
I mean, it's not like we have so many of these that we're giving out because
Correct.
of our limited funds.
Right.
And certainly I wouldn't want it to seem to the member of the public that code enforcement was overstepping or trying to dictate. It would be, purely to inform us if there was going to be some sort of obvious stumbling block to them getting through their renovation.
The previous home improvement program had some pretty extensive staff involvement doing, and it's something that we've peeled back, but it was the person in my position, and it basically a different incarnation, going out and doing that, and I certainly don't have that expertise, so I think
Sure.
I think that's something we could investigate at the commission.
One more thing on that piece, if someone is coming in to apply for a permit, they obviously know the work that they're going to have done. There's typically a scope of work. A contractor will usually build in some buffer. If it's a contractor, it's not just a homeowner improvement. A contractor will typically build in some buffer for overages. And I think that potentially as part of the review process, and again, this may very likely land in the lap of code enforcement, but if when they are filling out the permit for that project, the estimate can be reviewed. The permit fee, I believe, is tied to the cost of the improvement. So at least it is in other municipalities. I don't recall the last time I made a home improvement that I needed a permit for. On my do-list, but anyway, I think that maybe that's a simpler way to
Having a
review.
contingency built in.
Yeah, exactly. Just so that when the member of code enforcement reviews the estimate, for example, and even if it isn't a homeowner improvement, that they've built in a little bit of a buffer. So okay, if something goes a bit sideways, do we have a little bit of a cushion? Because I think it is important that we leave that on the homeowner should take some responsibility if in fact, we're gonna run into problems.
Yeah.
And then it's not just all, okay, let's come back and get more money because our funds are limited. So.
I think that's a good suggestion and good for Housing Commission to discuss.
Yeah.
One more quick question. The money that's gonna be allocated, if there's a home for sale and someone wants to come in and buy that home, and they say, well, City of Winooski is giving out loans to help me buy a home, are we gonna hold, there's no language in here if the person buys a home and then decides to rent it out, are we gonna kind of tie in, if someone buys a home and has this loan, it's not gonna be a rental, it's gonna be a single family home
They have to be an owner occupant, that's a requirement
That's a requirement.
of that,
Did I miss that?
program.
Okay.
So, it is, you're right that it is difficult to track that.
Okay.
I think it's difficult to verify that. It's easier because we do have the rental registry and we do have some information that comes in through that, so, but not with a single family home. With an owner occupied multi-unit, we do have some information that we can work from. But that is one of the difficulties with this type of program.
Well, I have a real simple minor feedback. On page 6 of the guideline in 3D, there's a typo.
Oh, wow. All right.
It should be authority to give permission as opposed to.
Instead of 5 permission? Thank you very much.
Sure.
I do feel the need to just call this out. Well, one, this is only here for discussion tonight. We're not asking you to approve anything, but I think the Housing Commission was interested in making sure we're going down the right path and it's approvable shortly. I think this is really exciting work and work that you guys have been working on for a long time. It is to a lot of the questions you've been asking tonight. It is a new service delivery arm that we are standing up that's going to take staff time that previously has been allocated to other things. I think it's the right thing to do and very much in alignment to your priorities and to the strategic vision, but I think it's always something we need to remind ourselves as we stand up a new initiative like this, that as we do that and add requirements to Heather's plate and to code enforcement's plate, there are either things that are going to get bumped off or other priorities that may be shifted around. So we don't have any concerns about that right now, but I feel it's my obligation to kind of flag that for you, especially with $500,000 grants Heather's been writing and whatnot.
It's also going to take more of the Housing Commission's time.
Yeah.
So they won't be able to produce as much policy if we're considering 21 to 33 applications in a year. That will be 1 hour of every meeting for the year, so at least.
Which is the best case scenario.
Yeah.
Best
Yes.
case.
Yeah.
And it's also been part of the discussion that this is sort of the basket where the eggs are going. Like the commission thinks that this is the best tool we have right now to get at some of these housing goals.
I think it's a great idea, and I think you guys have done a lot of great work. Just, I hope there's no loopholes that someone can find and really kind of put the screws to the city or to taxpayer. I think we found out on some other occasions about that, the loopholes. So the tighter we can make this document, I think the better off we are.
We put quality time into looking for loopholes.
Yeah, no, it's pretty detailed here.
And the fact that it's gonna be reviewed by the city attorney and Opportunities Credit Union will handle the lending arm, and CHT will help us with compliance. Because we've had all of those discussions, like, well, what if this, and to your point, what if somebody turns this owner-occupied purchase into an investment?
Yeah.
And they're getting dollars that should really be going towards a homeowner.
Exactly.
So we don't think that we are experts, and so we're going to rely on them.
No, absolutely.
Very
It's a
heavily.
start, and that's before we approve it, I think we just gotta make sure it's all as tight as it can be.
Any other questions or feedback?
I would say that it was really fun to try and find holes, and you couldn't find many, so thanks so much for all the great work that really went into it, and I think that the 3 programs really are clear, and they meet very different but complementary goals, so I think it's great to see that one kind of home improvement program be brought into these 3 different buckets that really kind of address different needs and aren't just focusing on new development of big scale, that we are providing these buckets for smaller loans. So thanks for making that work so well.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public? All right, well, as Jesse mentioned, this was a chance, just a discussion opportunity for feedback for our lovely commission. So thank you for coming in to present this.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for the feedback.
Our next item is also an item for discussion. It is a goal update on infrastructure from John Rasher.
John, I didn't mean to steal your thunder about the pool either. I meant to say that before I said my report.
You just made my presentation short.
Great.
So this is the first municipal infrastructure update. We have 3 scheduled for this FY20 season. We have 16 main tasks that have been assigned to municipal infrastructure during that policy and priorities strategy review. 3 of the 16 are associated with construction projects that are ongoing. So Myers Pool, which you mentioned, the wastewater treatment plant headworks project, and the Hickok water main replacement project. So that's a total of about $5.5 million investment in the city this season. And then the other 2 projects that will be kicking off after these get constructed would be the Main Street project and potentially the Lot 70 redevelopment. So the other sort of tasks and priorities involve planning budgetary improvements that you'll see for the FY21 budget, some new and revised ordinance that will be coming your way, and implementation of some internal kind of process improvements. So that's our, for example, our water quality, industrial wastewater permitting. But just overall, I think we're pretty on target with completing these goals for FY20. And I think what I'll do is just kind of run through the main projects, and then if you guys have particular questions on any of the items, we can go through them. So Main Street, as you're aware, we're in design phase right now. So we back in June, we approved the VHB proposal for $1.4 million for them to kind of start that work. We anticipate this fall we'll be presenting that sort of first final design phase project for you all. So that's where you'll really look at what are the updated project costs, what hopefully more grant monies we will receive, determined. And what kind of phasing options you'd like to pursue based on all the financials, all the updated financials. Myers Pool. So
I got a question.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this chart and nothing's in red, which is good, but the complete final engineering, why is that going slower than planned? Because we've had a few meetings on that.
Yeah. So with the Main Street project, I think one of the reasons it's a little slower than we expected was getting financing in place. So as you can imagine, getting financing for even the final design work, which is $1.5 million, is a little difficult because now we have all these funding partners that have come along. So we have USDA we have to satisfy, DEC we have to satisfy. So in a sense, it's good because we've got more peer review and they've been looking at the proposal work, and we've actually been able to bring that engineering cost down. But just getting everyone to sign off has taken a little more time.
So no major stalemates then?
No, and I mean overall project-wise,
yeah.
we're still targeting next season for a construction project. So in the grand scheme of delivering the project, it doesn't hurt us. It's just we're hoping to be a little further along at this point. Any other questions on Main Street before I move on? And again, we'll be talking about that more in the fall. Myers Pool, Mike had mentioned that project is doing well. It's on schedule. It's within budget. Late May next season is right now the scheduled opening for that. So right now what they're planning to do is complete the building, the new pool facility by winter shutdown. And as Mike mentioned, they're starting on the actual excavation work for the 2 pools. So that project's going really well. The treatment plant headworks project, that project is in construction. I added a couple photos. If anyone ever wants to go down and visit any of these projects, you're more than welcome. we have extra hard hats and high vis gear, so feel free. But that project is slated to be completed by mid-November. And actually there's some contract terms in there that they have to be done by mid-November. So that one will be wrapping up late this fall. And then Hickok Street, that project's going well. Again, mid-November construction schedule to complete the water portion. And the good thing about this project is we received a pretty significant subsidy from DEC through our financing. So we are, right now we're slated to get 30% grant for that project. And with the bidding, the favorable bidding received, we're looking at, approximately $740,000 actual construction cost. We originally estimated it at 1.4 million, so pretty significant savings. So the 737 includes this subsidy, I should mention. Any questions on current projects in construction? And then just to give you kind of a heads up what you will be seeing next couple months. So next month we will be presenting with VHB and CCRPC the East Allen scoping study, the final results of that. So you'll be presented with different alternatives on how that corridor could be reshaped transportation-wise. So that's coming September 16th. So that will, with your sort of recommendations on the alternatives, that will complete that project, and that gives us kind of go ahead to move forward more in the planning phase and looking for grant funding. So that will complete that task. Utility undergrounding ordinance. So we've cleared that through the former Public Works Commission, now the Municipal Infrastructure Commission. They've reviewed that ordinance previously, so we expect that's going to be coming to you all in September as well, just to get that ball rolling. Also, we partnered with the CCRPC on a transportation impact fee study. So we expect also in September to give a presentation with the selected consultant, RSG, on kind of how that would work. What's the framework of a transportation impact fee, what that means. And then from there, we'll be discussing if it's appropriate to move forward with it or not. The other item, and actually thanks to Jim, because I could put two completes on the checklist for the tree ordinance and the municipal infrastructure listed as the tree committee, because that's in the ordinance. So thank you. Tree City USA application, I think that's due late September, so I'm sure we'll be touching base on that. So those are kind of the upcoming items that you'll be seeing on the infrastructure side. Any questions, comments?
Impact fee recommendation, also slower than expected?
Yeah, mainly due to other projects kind of taking up, basically being on the front burner. This one we could kind of push to the back burner a little bit, but that one we're trying to ramp back up and kind of get it to the council to review.
Oh, where did I see it? Oh, yes. Can you tell us, so for the Priority 5 about upgrades to existing sidewalks, is the FY21 plan to complete the inventory, or is there actual work potentially coming?
So, actual work, but it wasn't really planned to be actual work. So, the Hickok Street project, so next season, that's when we'll be doing the street restoration work. That includes sidewalk restoration. There is a section of sidewalk that is in very poor condition that was previously inventoried. So good news is that would be one that we would replace, or would have replaced, targeted anyways, as part of the sidewalk replacement program. So, but what we're doing now is updating our inventory for 2019 so that we can discuss it during the FY21 budget to see if there's, what capacity do we have to do some sidewalk programs next year?
And so just say that a slightly
Yeah.
different way, in the past 2 years, capital improvement plan that you adopt as part of the budget process, we have prioritized other infrastructure work over sidewalks. And I think what we heard from you quite clearly during the priority session was ensure that the CIP we bring to you in 2021 for FY21 increases the amount we're spending annually on sidewalks within that CIP. So it's not necessarily new money, it's just reallocating money within the CIP. And John's inventory that he's completed will help inform the recommendations we make to you about where those sidewalks will be prioritized.
That'd be good to hear, because there's been some chatter about poor sidewalks and people falling. And I think that's, if one resident falls on a sidewalk the city owns and gets hurt, I think it makes it a priority to fix the sidewalk. We live in a great city, and I think it's unfair to residents to have poor sidewalks so they can't walk their dogs or walk their children safely, or walk in the road because of sidewalk pads that are just dangerous. And I don't know if this belongs in the sidewalk conversation, but there's been a lot of chatter on Front Porch Forum lately about the bridge and how poor the sidewalk is on the bridge. And I don't know if that's half our responsibility or half Burlington's responsibility, or if that's even...
It's a shared responsibility between us and Burlington and the state.
Okay.
We have to wait for the state to prioritize it. There are alternatives that have already been worked out. It's just a matter of them deciding that it's time to prioritize that bridge over others.
Because the article today I read, a biker actually fell into the road off the sidewalk. And I tell you, if a bus or a truck or a car was going by, that person would not be here with us. So, and then the couple bikers that were talking about it, the road is just in bad shape. They can't ride on the road either because of the space of the cracks in the road on the bridge. It just makes it dangerous for bikers. But we're gonna have that discussion on the next agenda.
I would say too, that when it comes to the CIP and budget planning, we've only got so much money and we have so many infrastructure needs. Like, we're gonna have to make decisions about what can and can't be done.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and just to reread the bridge, so there has been some work on what the proposed bridge replacement would look like. So we went through a whole scoping study with CCRPC and with Burlington, since they're 50% owner, and V-Trans was also in those discussions. But we do have a programmed sort of corridor for that bridge, which includes multi-use paths on either side, 12 foot wide, to accommodate what the actual users of that bridge are now.
Okay.
The next phase would be working with V-Trans to look at, scheduling and potential grant funding to make that project a reality. Because roughly it's an $18 million project, split in two, and hopefully we can get some V-Trans support to make it economically feasible.
Is it possible for the Public Works Department to fix sidewalks on their own? If they're out of whack from whatever reason, roots, frost heaves from them going up and down year after year?
Yep.
I mean, you don't have to necessarily replace all the sidewalk, but just make sure that the safety of the pattern of the sidewalk isn't dangerous for children or for our seniors. I mean, is there a plan in place for that? Because there has been a lot of talk about the sidewalk, not to mention potholes, but the sidewalks have been something that I've been hearing a lot about.
Yeah, so we do spot repairs, so you'll see some in front of the Winooski Housing Authority. We did a couple this year. So as we get requests in, we put them into our sort of asset management system, and then we'll go out and do 5 foot flag replacements, or we'll do asphalt transitions if it's like a lip tripping hazard. So if folks do know where, or if they have feedback on where some of those sidewalks are, call my office. Okay. We'll note it. We're walking the streets too, trying to find those locations as well to do
Not to put you on the spot, but one has been on Rogers Street. Have you guys been on Rogers Street? And then one has been down on, what, is that West Canal where the brewery is?
Yeah.
West Canal, I don't know if anyone has actually, I know a resident touched base with us, and she emailed Jesse. I don't know if you guys have had time yet to go down there and assess that, but there's an opportunity there for some safety issues to be rectified, I think.
Great, okay.
So I just want to say that this update is full of exciting stuff and a lot of news that I think residents would like to hear. So now that, Mike, you are again officially the municipal infrastructure liaison, while there hasn't been a meeting, it could be a good time to pull from this memo to do an update.
In the newsletter?
Yeah, the newsletter, have Paul push it out, do front porch forum.
You got it?
Any other questions for John on this update? Jim, you look like you're about to say something.
No. Come on, Jim, you know you want to say something.
Okay, we got the tree already, so I'm fine. No.
Yeah.
I just have one question on the sidewalks. I literally did have a question, I'm sorry. But you're replacing the poor section of Hickok. I'm sorry, I don't remember what the section between Elm and Pine is like. Is there a reason that you're only doing, since you're already doing streetscape rehabilitation, is there a reason to only do that red section, given that you're already tearing up the road? I'm just curious kind of what the thinking is on doing some
So that's actually worst case. The section on the north side that was observed to be in poor condition, we may extend that to do more pending what our construction estimates come out to be. But that's just a section we've identified that we know we're gonna replace. I think there'll be room, based on the numbers we're seeing right now, to potentially extend that to other sections of Hickok.
Okay. And does it include like installation of Greenbelt in between the sidewalk and road, which usually isn't present there?
Yeah, so it'll be maintaining existing, so there's currently some Greenbelt in there, I believe. There's the section on the north side, the main issue is there's a lot of drainage problems, so it's like it's lower than the curb line. There may be sections that are up against a curb, but it's a really narrow right of way. So if we can get Greenbelt in, if there isn't any, then we'll try. But
let's not make any drain issues.
Yeah, no, we're trying to improve the drainage issues.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions from council? Public? Questions or comments? Well, thank you for this update, and please stay with us for the next item. Please do not be. Capital improvement budget reassignment for Main Street concrete repairs, which is an item for potential approval.
Yes, so as we were putting together our transportation pavement repaving work this year, we've kind of adjusted some of our scope of work. So partially in due because of we were looking at a V-Trans grant for East Spring Street that did not come through, so we had to adjust our paving program slightly. So this year we're doing LeClaire Streets, Burling, and Richards, which is less than what we had originally programmed for. And we also are looking at doing some crack sealing work for roadway repairs. As we got into the crack sealing work, we also received some estimates for Main Street concrete repair work. So I'm sure you're all familiar, but the hill up over here, just to the bridge, there's concrete road surface with joints that have a poor ride quality, I would say. Act like speed bumps. Probably one of the most commented on things.
Not just northbound, southbound too.
Yeah. So that whole section, we reached out to V-Trans originally, and thank you to Hal, who's been bugging the state often. We met with Representative McCormick to look at if there's a way to expedite state repairs for that route. Unfortunately, there is not, but there's an FY21 project where V-Trans is looking to do a permanent repair for that concrete section along with West Allen and the circulator section of concrete. So a little long-winded, but we're looking to do a temporary fix basically to get us to that FY21 project. And it's in the amount of approximately $32,000. So what we're requesting is not additional money from fund balance, but just adjusting what we already have in our transportation CIP to do that work. So the proposed scope of work would be probably a 3-year fix. It's using cementous material to fill in the joints to improve ride quality. It's meant to be a temporary repair.
And when is the FY21 work scheduled for?
So, you know, it's going to be 2 years out, basically. We have to live with it for, and that's scheduled, not, you know, it's not set in stone, I will say. So
Yeah.
it's on a work plan for V-Trans, but, you know, things do happen.
So there is that risk that it doesn't actually come in 2 years, but it is currently on a work plan. Is there, you know, you've made the decision, like you think this is the best way to use that money. Is there something else that you considered, or you think this, you know, what is your logic that this is this temporary fix is the right way to use that money that we're no longer using on the other street?
Yep, so we looked at a couple different options. We looked at using something similar to like an asphalt pavement, but the bonding doesn't work for concrete. So we started looking at airports. So airports have concrete tarmacs. This is typically their low-cost repair option that they used. There's really only one contractor in this area that kind of does this work, as we found when we went out to bid. And we also worked with them, had them come up from Massachusetts to take a look at the joints with us. And this was their kind of low-cost repair option.
Do you mean other projects in the city though? Like if we weren't gonna do this Main Street?
Yeah. Like, so you've
Oh.
decided that you have some extra money, you want to use it for this? Like, why this over other things?
Yeah, so I mean, and this is a council question. So I mean, 30 grand could go towards milling and filling asphalt pavement. It could go towards sidewalks. This is just the most complained about item that I usually hear of. So
I totally agree.
It's completely up to you all if this is appropriate or not. But I'm recommending yes, just to improve the ride quality. You know, there's vehicle. I've heard complaints of potential vehicle damage with suspension. So.
And it's just the northbound, not the southbound lanes?
It's both lanes.
Both lanes, okay.
Oh, it says northbound.
The color strip was a little thrown off.
Apologize. Yeah, it's both driving lanes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
What sort of impact do you anticipate on traffic if you were to do that repair?
So that was our main concern with this section of roadway.
Yeah.
This is a pretty, I would say, quick repair. So what they'll end up doing is there's enough room with the parking located along the bridge that they can maintain two lanes and just temporarily remove the parking and let that mastic kind of cure, and then they'll move more to the other side. So relatively low impact for vehicles traveling to and from.
Let me ask you this, John. The project that we agreed on, the Claire East Spring repave, what project is that, the repaving of those roads, that area?
So this year we're doing LeClaire Street, the entire section, along with Burling and Richard, which connect to that.
What about West Spring Street and Spring Street?
So West Spring Street and Spring Street are Class 2, and they're eligible for V-Trans grants. So we've decided to wait and reapply next year to try to take advantage of the V-Trans grants for those, so using city funds.
Because we're Spring Street in, is it Hood or Franklin, there is some major road issues there.
That will be repaved as part of the LeClaire.
And what I'm concerned about spending this $32,000 on something that's gonna be torn up, it says fiscal year 21, so we're actually a year and a half away from that. They're not gonna start a project like that, redoing Main Street in the fall, so it's gonna be.
But it's sorry to interrupt you, Mike. My understanding is it's on the FY21 state work plan, which means planning for the project starts in FY21 and then likely will be done in like the summer of 22. Is that correct?
Okay, so that's different.
So that's, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, because you have to, with the way the state lays out their plans, you have to incorporate that like planning and engineering. It's not that when it starts in FY21, there's a
Yeah,
certain.
no, that's-
Yeah, sorry, it's a little confusing.
Well, it says road repair in FY21, so it says permanent concrete road repair in FY21. So they're saying that they're not gonna repair in 21, it's gonna be 22?
Most likely 22. I'd say.
Okay. Well, that's different then. 'Cause I was trying to wrap my head around spending $32,000 if it's just a year away, ripping it up. It's like throwing money out the window.
Yeah, if it was a year away, I would not put this forward. But
Especially when there's other issues around Winooski where people are complaining about Spring Street, there's potholes everywhere. And I don't know how much that $32,000 could go fixing the rest of the streets that people are complaining about when there's a road that's gonna be redone in a year or two.
But I think the volume that road has is just significant, and if we prolong this, we're gonna lose cars. I mean, it's just getting worse.
Well, so is in Spring Street though. Have you been down Spring Street?
Yeah, I've been there too, but I
That
think
intersection.
this is a corridor that really is a lot of traffic, so get a lot of complaints.
You could ask how far $26,000 goes for remilling, like how much of Spring Street could you do for $26,000?
probably a block. I mean, so all of West Spring Street was like $150,000, and that's just a mill one layer, inch and a half, and put down an inch and a half. So not.
I live on West Spring Street, and sorry to my neighbors, but that doesn't feel like a priority road to me compared to some of these other problems.
Yeah.
The intersection you're referring to, Mike, is pretty rough.
No, that's
East
East Spring Street.
East Spring.
I mean, someone's gonna lose a tire there. It's awful. I mean, I think Public Works needs to address it sooner than later. In my opinion, I mean, a quick fix for now until, like you said, we're gonna do the replanning next year on that road. And that whole section right there has a lot of traffic too, because people bypass the rotary and go down East Spring Street to get to Main. So that also has a significant amount of traffic as well. And but it makes sense now if you're saying it's gonna be in the year 22. You know, as I'm reading it here, it says concrete road repair in 21. So that's why when I read it initially, I'm like, well, why are we doing that if it's a year away?
Yeah. I will say on East Spring Street, one of the worst intersections is right at LeClaire Street, and that is part of our project this year, because that whole like intersection, it's pretty potholed.
Is that where it dips?
I think it's where Franklin Street is, right across from the courtyard. That whole stop sign section is pretty bad as well. But
So the strategy is try again next year to get East Spring Street done through a grant program, and this year repair for 3 years the Main Street. So that's one option, or the other option is to do one block of Spring Street now and then apply for grants to basically patch around it next year. Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, it seems that that providing that, because I also presume it will reduce or just delay the further degradation of the bridge, because I think that's the other question, is how bad will it be in 3 years if we're not doing any sort of interim repair now? I mean, I take East Spring Street because I don't want to go down Main Street into the rotary, so I think that would be, from a priority perspective, that seems to make sense to me. But
the other question I have, if we fix Main Street with this temporary fix for 3 years, is that plan that the V-Trans is gonna have, are we gonna get put on the bottom of the docket then, since we've temporarily fixed it? Or is it gonna be in the same scope of planning? Is it gonna be in the forefront? Probably not either, so that's another thing I wanna be cautious about. You know, because that whole road needs to be repaired, just not temporarily. I mean, it's awful.
change our priority status in the planning.
Yeah, it wouldn't change the priority status, especially given that this is the type of work we're doing is a temporary repair.
Yeah,
It's just a joint. Basically, it's like crack sealing an asphalt road. It's not meant to be any sort of permanent fix. And what they're looking at doing is actually diamond grinding the whole surface down a couple inches and some type of surface treatment. We don't know what yet, if it's gonna be concrete or asphalt top surface. So what they're proposing is, a pretty substantial repair. And it would also include this section. We're not even talking about the circulator. That's the section that is still concrete. That's part of this V-Trans scope of work.
So the scope is bigger, so there's
Yeah.
more at play that we are not touching that
Right.
also
Right,
helps
okay.
keep us in the,
We're just trying to deal with the
Thank you.
worst case
Mhm.
at this point.
no public comment? Any other questions or concerns from council? So this item is on for approval. I would entertain a motion to approve the capital improvement budget reassignment for Main Street concrete repairs.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right. So on to our final item. This is another item for discussion about a personnel hearing process. I'm going to call up Matthew Shagum, an attorney that is supporting us. I believe Jesse will be
I'm just gonna
exiting.
go into the audience because I cannot advise you on this.
Yes. So for some context, we have a personnel matter. It is our role as city council to be kind of the end of the appeals process. So we have an employee who is I'm not even sure how much I can say. An employee who has been terminated and is appealing that decision. We are the last step of approval, or of appeal. And I have invited an attorney here to describe that process to us. So we're not gonna talk about the actual decision, the employee, any of the details about it tonight. We are just gonna learn, what does this process look like? What is our role in it? We're gonna have this in open session because we are just discussing process. If, however, our attorney or someone here wants to discuss, has questions that maybe should move to executive session, then we can change. But for now, while we're just discussing the process itself. Welcome, Matthew, and thank you for coming tonight and for sitting through the rest of the meeting.
Oh, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. And basically, I'm happy to answer any general questions, but what I will start off with is that when you're terminating in a public employee, the first question is, generally speaking, are they covered by some kind of collective bargaining agreement? If they are not covered by a collective bargaining agreement, then generally their employment status is the same as most private employees. They are going to be at-will employees, and any termination rights that they may have are essentially going to be procedural, aside from the general protected categories, so no discharges for race, gender, disability, that sort of a thing. And so in terms of the procedural requirements, they're fairly straightforward. They are what are contained in your handbook. And of course, the city of Winooski does have a policies and procedures guideline for this matter, or this kind of matter. I have it up on my computer. I assume that yourselves are able to access it and have copies available to you, and that lays out most of the steps, all of the steps that are involved. Generally speaking, though, the kinds of considerations that are at play are fairly straightforward. They're due process considerations. And at the heart of due process in the employment arena is that the employee knows if this is a termination for cause or if there is grounds for the termination, and there does not have to be, but presumably the employee is informed why they are being terminated. They are given some meaningful opportunity to rebut the allegations against them, some ability to present their own evidence. It's not the same as a courtroom necessarily. You don't get to subpoena witnesses, but if there are witnesses who are able to attend and who are able to speak on the employee's behalf, it's generally considered a wise idea to allow them to do that as long as it's relevant to the grounds for termination, and that ultimately the decision's made by a neutral body of an open mind. And so that is probably the biggest sort of consideration, generally speaking. It's generally considered wise to basically at the hearing to ask questions, to allow both the people who are presenting in favor of the employee's termination and the employee themselves to have their say, to ask questions about what has happened. And then generally speaking, most public bodies go into executive session to be able to deliberate what it is that they have just heard and make a final determination about the employment of that employee. It is generally fairly straightforward if it does take some time to do properly, though. Any questions about that? My understanding, and let me actually hold off on that because I don't want to speak to process that may be involved here unless the committee would like to go into executive session if they have any more particular questions about the upcoming termination hearing.
So I should apologize. I didn't explicitly share. We do all have access to the handbook, but I did not in advance share with you the section on our policies and procedure process. You have it there? Would you be able to give a quick recap to us?
Yeah, if you'll give me just a few moments to get to the correct section here. And so,
I actually do have one hard copy with you.
yes, actually I have a hard copy with me if the council would like to have a copy. And it's section 3.5.
Or I don't. I apologize.
Very good. And so this is a little bit, would anyone in the committee like a copy?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. You have this. Oh, sure. So I want to pass this so you can take a quick look at the steps. This is basically like we are in this step 3 section.
Yes, so terminations at section 3.5, and then by the time that the city council is brought on board, that's going to be in the grievance procedures at section 4.3, and when the matter reaches the city commission, or sorry, the city council, you can see what the steps laid out in that handbook are. And so at step 3, if the grievance is not resolved at step 2, the grievant may, within 5 working days of receipt of the city manager's response, issue a letter addressed to the mayor outlining the sections of the human resource manual that he or she believes was violated and the resolution he or she wishes to have regarding the grievance. The council shall, at its next meeting, hear the grievance in open session or an executive session at the request of the grievant. At such hearing, the council may be advised by an attorney of their choice. The city manager may be represented by an attorney or the city's choice. The city council may find for either party in the grievance, request professional advice in the form of a qualified attorney to advise them of their options, or send the parties to a mediator to attempt to find a suitable resolution to the dispute. Ultimately, the decision of the council is final. And just read a little bit more there, otherwise that's pretty much most of it. At any step, the division director, city manager, the council may invite witnesses or hold meetings to determine the facts of the case or to hear from different perspectives on an issue. And then failure by the grievant to adhere to the specified time period shall render the grievance null and void. Failure of the appropriate party on management side to render a decision within the specified time shall cause said grievance to advance to the next step in the procedure. And then probationary employees don't have grievance rights. And that is essentially what is laid out in the handbook. And so I would just return to the general principles of due process when you're considering terminating an at-will employee, which is again that the employee has been provided some meaningful notice of the reasons for their discharge. They have an opportunity to respond to that in a meaningful way, and there's some flex there, but generally speaking, they have the ability to speak on their own behalf and then call any witnesses who may want to speak to the relevant facts. And then the decision is pretty much taken by neutrals. Don't really have anything in one way or the other as an interest, and that it's made after a deliberation where the matters have been put forward.
Thank you for that. So you'll notice you've never met Matthew here before because we do not use the city's attorney to advise us on this matter, since they will be using their own attorney. So I've engaged his law firm to be our advisor as he described in the process, so that when this hearing takes place, you know, we hear from the grievant, also from staff, whoever has brought as witnesses, then we would take our attorney, go into executive session, deliberate on what we've heard, receiving advice from the attorney to make sure that we make a decision that is legal and, you know, we've been fair and that sort of thing. We don't know yet. We are still working out the schedule for the hearing, so I don't know. I don't believe it's going to be at our next meeting. Well, it's not on Wednesday, I'll tell you that. We are still working out the schedule, so I don't know what the date of that will be, but we wanted to have an introductory session just to let you get familiar with the process before we actually, we actually have this hearing.
I believe it will actually be my boss, Rich Cassidy, who will be attending and providing counsel to yourselves. And he sends his regards. Unfortunately, he is in Canada on business, but otherwise would be here tonight, except for the distance involved. And I think that's about it, unless there's any questions from the council.
Are we able to contact your firm directly if we have questions?
Yes.
Or does it have to be in warned minutes? If we
No, you could. Yeah, because it's legal advice can be.
It's legal advice,
Yeah.
and they can call you if I
You would
want.
be able to go into executive session for what I've said here today under the open meeting statute, because you are able to go into executive session as to questions, so you would have attorney-client privilege as to, especially as to general questions. More specific ones, I would hold off discussing right here in this forum at this moment.
I would also say that when it comes to, like, we should not discuss anything about the grievance itself or the actual situation until we have that hearing, because we need to approach that hearing as a neutral party who, you know, you're hearing things at that time.
How long are these types of hearings typically?
Well, it depends on the nature of the violation. And generally speaking, as you would imagine, something for an egregious abuse of a position, probably not long. Something that has to do with long-term sustained underperformance of a given performance standard. You know, you're late every day by 10 minutes for a month. There may be a lengthier hearing involved because it may be more. Each case is going to have somebody, some justification, some rationale. So it's hard to say on a case-by-case. It's a case-by-case decision. It's hard to say generally.
Would that be our only agenda item potentially, or?
Depends how it plays out. So we have to make sure that
Probably should be.
the grievant, that the date works for the grievant.
Yeah.
Any representation they bring, as well as our schedule and staff that need to be there. So there is potential that it could be the only item in that meeting. I think Jesse and I have also discussed, if it is not, if this occurs at a regular meeting where we have other things we have to do, being really thoughtful about only including items that, you know, need to happen on that date so that we.
Warrants,
Yeah.
warrants and stuff that.
Yeah, that has to happen.
That has to happen.
Probably putting the grievance first.
Yeah, to make sure that we can get
Yeah.
that process taken care of for all parties involved.
That makes sense.
Can I ask what determines whether the hearing is conducted in open or executive session?
So because this is an employment matter, it may be conducted in executive session. So it would be up to the discretion of the council whether to hold the hearing in open or whether to hold it in executive session.
I thought that the grievant got to make that decision.
That is correct. Excuse me. The open meeting statute does call for that, but the procedures in the handbook essentially make that the choice of the grievant. So it's you're entitled by statute, but the procedures in the handbook are that the grievant has the choice.
Any other questions about this process? Is anyone having questions that are burning, that they feel like they would like to take some time in an executive session, keeping in mind that we are trying to cover just the process today and not the actual grievance? No public questions? I have our manual in electronic file. I'll make sure to get that out to all of you and let you know what page this information is on. If you have any questions in the meantime, please let me know. We could also field questions to the attorney's office if there's something we need to sort out beforehand, before this comes to us on an agenda.
Do you have any cards with you?
I'm afraid I do not, and I'd be happy to email you my contact afterwards, however.
I can pass it along.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, then we can close out this item. Thank you so much for coming in.
Would you like this back?
Oh, sure.
What else?
Here's the other half.
Is that in the order?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in tonight.
That is our final item for tonight's agenda. As such, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned. Thank you. We are